Hi, I'm Natalie Nixon. I am a creativity strategist and the president of Figure Eight Thinking. I'm also the author of The Creativity Leap, and I'm thrilled today to be joined with Alan Greenberger, who is an architect by training, former deputy mayor for the city of Philadelphia, and now the head of the Department of Architecture, Design, and Urbanism at Drexel University. Hi, Alan.
Hi, Natalie. That was a fantastic introduction.
Did I get that right?
Extremely well done.
Awesome. Well, I'm really happy to have you here. We've known each other for at least 5 years, maybe 10
At least
years
5 years.
now. And you also very kindly wrote a really nice endorsement for the book, The Creativity Leap, which I really appreciated. And I wanted people to hear some of your perspective on creativity. So the first question I have for you is, would you share a story about a time when you have made a creativity leap?
Yes, I'd be happy to. I've been involved in a number of big design of big projects in my life, particularly during my professional life as an architect. And one in particular comes to mind. I've always found that the leaps that I'm able to make happen because I'm very relaxed. And so, you just sort of ask yourself, well, where are you relaxed? I find that I'm very relaxed when, the pressing matters of the world are not around, when you can focus. I find that I'm very relaxed when I'm actually not thinking about the problem at hand. Yeah, a lot of people do good thinking in the shower because you've got
Yeah,
water beating down on you. That's always helpful.
totally.
But this one instance involves the School of Music and Performing Arts Center that we did at Westchester University. And the site for it is a very peculiar site because it's not really in the heart of the campus. It's kind of a block away. And it's in a part of campus that was really undistinguished. There was a massive parking lot next door, somewhat of a high-speed state highway that was not very friendly. And the nearest immediate building, frankly, was nothing terribly exciting. It was built in the 60s. It was kind of a dreary school building, although we had renovated a piece of it to include a new black box theater, which was quite nice, but you didn't see that from the outside.
Right.
So all in all, the site was not very nice. And I don't remember, I guess I had walked that site many, many times, and I was probably in the midst of doing something else. And I wish I could remember what the something else was. But it sort of occurred to me, having absorbed all of that information, which frankly took a long time to absorb, just letting it percolate, you might say. It occurred to me that what we really wanted to do was get inside the site quickly, get past that building, get away from the road, figure out how to ignore the parking lot in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And this image popped up in my head about walking. I could literally picture the walking past this building and how our new building might be a kind of, I kept thinking it was a bit of a seductive curve that led your eye in, and then you needed to arrive at a place. And for me, arrival at place, before you get into a building, always involved courtyards. I think are, always been historically wonderful places of arrival or presence. And so I had this image in my head of curved wall, arrival at place, and also a way in that kind of tilted us away from the road and sort of gave us a bit of an oasis. And then happily, I didn't know it at the time, but happily, when we laid that out for real, it turns out that the whole thing turned its back to the parking lot and oriented itself to a garden that was part of the president's house that was nearby, but visible. So it all really kind of came together quite nicely. And it came about honestly, because I was thinking about something else.
Right, right. And it's interesting, you talked about the value of being relaxed. And I wonder now during the time of COVID-19, there's a lot of stress that people have. And I've been trying to urge and encourage clients and just the community of people with whom I interact that days of uncertainty are designed for creativity. What kind of perspective do you have, if any, about that mode of relaxation and
Mm.
being creative, but also during this time of crisis, like what's the intersection between the two?
Well, I think they're two different things, but they do come together. The uncertainty, I think, allows us to think about things we didn't otherwise think about. Like, I mean, look, we at universities, we've struggled forever thinking about, oh, we should do more things online. Gee, maybe we should find a faculty member who feels comfortable with it and let them play around with it for a couple of years and then tell us how it went before we even put our foot in the pool. Meanwhile, back in March, no more feet in the pool. It's just dive into the deep end and figure it out.
Right.
So we did. Everybody did. And everybody, oddly enough, the experience was, hey, this isn't as bad as we thought. We could actually swim. Now, there's a lot to do. I mean, people who taught online will tell you there's so much more to it. And I believe all that. But meanwhile, we're doing it. And
Right.
we're making something go. So honestly, 3 months ago, we wouldn't have thought this was possible. So uncertainty does do that. The intersection, I think, though, with relaxing is that the tension also makes you focus on the matter at hand, which is usually a defined matter. And I'm not sure, at least for me, that's not when I get to be at my creative best. So for me, what I want to do, even sitting here at home, you know, and 1 hour after the other, being on Zoom or sitting at my computer writing, I've got to get up and do things. And one of the nice ways to do it is like, I've got a garden, so go out and mow the lawn, or
Yeah.
anything that forces you not to be consumed by the problems at hand. Because one of the problems is that you tend to think of things like a puzzle,
Hmm.
say, okay, here are the pieces, how do they fit together? And you think, this one, this one, this one. And sometimes what you have to do, and particularly if you relax a little bit, is to stop looking at the problems. And, it's the old forest for the trees.
Yes.
Just like, what are you really trying to do here?
Zoom out a bit.
Zoom out and then zoom back in. And
Yeah.
there's a piece of in our urban design studio a long time ago. I used to teach with a fellow named John Lang, who was at Penn at the time, and now he's been in Australia for a number of decades probably. He had this diagram about how design think works that I always liked, because he said there was a piece of it that was a linear line. You start here and you end here.
Hmm.
He said along the line, he described it as a series of orbits around
Hmm.
the line. And sometimes they're huge orbits, sometimes they're tight orbits, but in the end, long term, the big orbits slowly get closer and closer to the line until at the end, they merge in time. And I thought that was a nice way of thinking about it.
I
And
love that visual.
I
That's
talked to our
awesome.
students about it, and I said, it's okay, go into orbit,
Yeah.
stop worrying about the linear problem and just go into orbit, think other thoughts, let your mind sort of wander to something that may seem irrelevant, and then come back.
Oh, that's awesome.
Keep doing it.
Nice. John Lang.
John Lang, he wrote a book called, it's up on my shelf here somewhere. It's called Urban Design. I think it's just called Urban Design. It's an incredibly dense book. It's big tablet format with a huge amount of type in it. But John was a very smart guy. I really liked him. He's still alive, I think, in Sydney or New South Wales somewhere.
Cool, cool. Thank you for that. Next question for you is, who's an example, living or dead, of a wonder mentor for you?
Well, if you don't mind, because there's an overlap here, I'm going to take on the Wonder Mentor and the Rigor Mentor at the
Sure.
same time. Because I worked, when I came to Philadelphia back when, I worked at a firm named Mitchell and Jergala, two people, Airman Mitchell, Romaldo Jergala. And I thought, as I thought about your question, I thought that they represented those two things so beautifully that I wanted to talk about them together.
Hmm.
Um, Romaldo Jergala was they were both very talented designers, but Aldo, as we called him, was clearly the design lead for the firm, and he was that wonder mentor. I have never met anybody in my life to Gate, who was able, as much as he was, to think and create and draw simultaneously. And
Wow.
his drawings were evocative, his thinking was amazing, and he would use that kind of mind to hand to pencil to tracing paper as a means of his expression, but he would complement it with words. He could tell a narrative. You could do a narrative while he was drawing. He was an amazing skill, and his
Hmm.
drawings were beautiful. I mean, the guy could really draw magnificently, and I spent a lot of years watching him carefully, and tried to develop those habits in me of translating what's in your head, oftentimes as words, sometimes as images, to paper so that you can share it with others.
So it's almost like he could speak in shapes, it sounds like.
Well, yeah. In fact, that's a good description. You might even think of it as he could speak two languages at once. He could
Yeah.
speak the language of words, he could speak the language of space and time, and he could do it simultaneously. I have never
Hmm.
met anybody who could do it as well as he could do it. And I've modeled my own drawing habits and my own kind of thinking habits, at least about design, to be as close to his as I can get. I'm not nearly as good as he was at it. He died a few years ago at the age of 95, but
Wow.
God, was he good at it. And honestly, I've never seen anybody, any architect, anybody who was that good. It was
Nice.
just an awesome thing word I hardly use, but it was an awesome thing to behold.
Hmm. And your rigor mentor was Mr. Mitchell?
So my rigor mentor was Airman Mitchell, because what we used to call him Mitch, what Mitch brought to was this very strong sense of what is ethically and professionally the right way to be as an architect. And that was his contribution, I'd say, to the firm. He was also a pretty good designer, but in the end, the strength of Aldo sort of overwhelmed him. But boy, Mitch provided a kind of ethos to the office that was very powerful. Mitch was very involved in National American Institute of Architects. He was the president of American Institute of Architects nationally in 1978. I think was certainly an inspiration for me to be willing to be involved in what was AIA, in AIA Matters. I was president of the Philadelphia chapter in '92, and a devotee of the organization of architects. And Mitch brought all that. I'm not even sure he knew that he brought all that.
Hmm.
Uh, but I think those of us who were there when he was part of the firm always felt that there was a level of discipline, professionalism, and very, very strong sense of integrity that he represented. One of the things that he did, which was so amazing, well, he and Aldo did two things. He became aware for a project from long, long ago, before even I joined the firm, where there was some suspicious activity going on during construction. Billing invoicing for very expensive products that seemed to show up on site and then disappear.
Hmm.
And Mitch got wind of it, and he blew the whistle on what was going on. And it turns out there was fraud going on by this one particular contractor who was moving a very expensive piece of machinery to a couple of sites and invoicing for it. That's a remarkably brave thing to do. And then he and Aldo, and I would guess that this maybe was as much the both of them, but I can imagine Mitch leading this. They won a competition in 1965 to design the new headquarters for the American Institute of Architects on New York Avenue and 18th Street in DC. And if you saw the design at the time, now, you'd be hard pressed to understand what the big controversy was. But at
Hmm.
the time, it was a controversial design, and it was rejected by the Washington Fine Arts Commission. They came back and did a second scheme, a modified version. It was rejected again. They came back and did a third version, and it was still some controversy, and it looked like it wasn't going to pass the Art Commission. And it's a young firm. The firm was only 7 years old at that time.
Hmm.
They win this national competition, possibly the most prestigious thing they could imagine at the time, and they finally resigned. And they just said, you know what? This is crazy. We're not going
Right.
to we're not, whatever it is they want us to do, we're clearly not doing it.
That's
And
an example of having your own true North Star, huh?
it really was. And I think it was an enormous lesson for all of us. For me, one of the lessons was, and I did this, when we would run into things that we thought were just ethically wrong, if we couldn't solve them, we'd back out. I resigned 2 commissions over it. Not,
Hmm.
well, 2 commissions. I mean, they were real, not nearly as big and national figure as that AIA thing, but I think Mitch gave me the courage to do that when you just think a situation is fundamentally wrong and it compromises your integrity. You just walk away. And
Wow.
that's
Very hard to do. You're right. That does take a lot of courage, and
very hard.
you're really fortunate that you had those examples in the flesh at a early part of your career.
Well, it's
Now,
funny because having done it, it didn't, I mean, I knew at the time it was a big deal, but it never frightened me. And I think it never frightened me because I saw them do it on a much bigger stage than me, and they survived. And I thought, well, okay, then this is what you do.
nice. Well, thank you so much, Alan. Is there any final thoughts you'd like to share before we sign off?
Well, the final thought I have for you is that I'm just constantly impressed and amazed by what you're doing around creativity and around design thinking. So I want to figure out ways we can do more things together.
Thank you
That's
so
my
much.
commitment to you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And thanks for your time today.
My pleasure.